Good afternoon, everybody. I'm calling the regular meeting of the Planning Commission to order for Thursday, January 17th, 2019. Ms. Vaughn, would you take roll, please?
Thank you. Chair Wiskup?
Here.
Vice Chair Jordan?
Here.
Commissioner Higgins?
Here.
Commissioner Lodge?
Here.
Commissioner Schwartz?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
Commissioner Campanella is absent.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Okay, we're moving on to item number 2A, requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex-agenda items. Ms. DeBusk?
Madam Chair, we have none.
Okay, and B, announcements and appeals?
Yes, thank you. I have two announcements. One is regarding item 2C1, which is review of the minutes. Just to note that there is a typo. We're not reviewing January 10th, 2018 minutes. We're reviewing 2019 minutes. And then I did want to announce that an appeal has been filed for the project at 35 North Calle Cesar Chavez, and that's the CUP that the Planning Commission approved on January 10th last week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're moving on to item number 2C, which is review, consideration, and action on the following draft Planning Commission minutes and resolutions. The first one is the January 10th, 2019 minutes, as corrected on the agenda by Ms. DeBusk. And then we have two resolutions. Would anyone like these taken separately? Okay.
I'll move to approve the minutes as amended and the resolutions.
Okay, and I just have, do I have a second to that?
Second.
Okay, second by Commissioner Jordan. We did have a request from Mr. Kuykendall, the agent for, or applicant for 35 North Calle Cesar Chavez, and his request was to add one section, which you should have there on, this is item 2C2, where it would read at the end of the second paragraph, conditional use permit to allow the existing buildings in the OM1 zone to be used as construction materials, warehouse, and lumber yard, which are not allowed per Santa Barbara Municipal Code 28.73.030A. And then he would like us to add, but are allowed with a conditional use permit per Santa Barbara Municipal Code 28.73.030B. Would the maker of the motion accept that?
That was the amended minutes.
Oh,
That
yes,
was part of
yes,
the amended
it's the amended resolution. Okay, and that was your motion.
Right.
Okay, and the seconder was fine with that. Okay, great. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to item 2D, comments from the public, from members of the public pertaining to items not on this agenda. Each person is limited to 2 minutes. Is there anyone here that is speaking on an item that's not on our agenda? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to close general public comment, and we'll move on to item number 3, new items. Item number 3A, review of the city's draft 5-year capital improvement program, CIP, for fiscal years 2020 to 2024 for consistency with the general plan per Government Code Section 65103C and 65401. And we will have a staff report on the item, and then we're going to, per our agenda procedures, we're going then to general public comment on the item, and we have quite a few speakers on it, and then we'll come back to the commission for questions and comments and deliberation. So, Ms. DeBusk, would you like to introduce staff for me? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Christy Velasquez will be giving the presentation. She's joined by Rebecca Bjork, Public Works Director. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome.
Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. I'm Rebecca Bjork, Public Works Director. I'm just going to give the introduction to the item, and Ms. Velasquez, who's our administrative analyst, will follow up with the presentation. The capital improvement plan that you are looking at here is prepared largely by Ms. Velasquez on behalf of the entire city and compiled by Public Works. The plan has a slight format change this year in that we are doing a 5-year plan. Historically, we've been doing 6-year plans. But the 6th year of that plan was really just a placeholder for future projects that we knew were out there but didn't fit into the plan and we wanted to capture. So we've changed the format this year so that that 6th year actually says future. We think that's more clear and more transparent to the public who might be reading it. So today, sorry, used to pushing the button for the machine. Today's, the purpose of Planning Commission's review is to review the new projects in the CIP for consistency with the general plan. The old projects in the CIP were really directing you to focus on the ones that were not previously included because, of course, that determination was previously made for projects already in the CIP. Doing that, so the policies in the general plan there are lots and lots of pages, as you all know, but for the benefit of others who may not be as familiar, some of the general plan policies that are more particular to the CIP include the circulation element, which seeks to improve traffic flow, improved access for pedestrians, bicycles, and public and private transit through physical roadway improvements, travel demand management strategies, and other actions. Accessibility is a focus across the city. We want to make sure that our city is as accessible as possible to all people. And then very importantly, making sure that we're complying with the local coastal plan policies. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Velasquez, who will make the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Wiscombe and Planning Commission. So what is a capital project? To showcase what a capital project is, I've included a time-lapse video of our Laguna Lot Permeable Pavers project. A capital project is generally defined as an activity that creates, improves, replaces, repairs, or maintains a fixed asset with a total cost and inventory of $100,000 or more with a life expectancy of 5 years or greater. So our main goals of the CIP is to provide a planning document for capital improvements. This includes appropriate supportive information to the needs of the project or the improvement over the 5-year planning period. It's used to identify unmet capital needs based on anticipated funding levels and to provide a plan for priority capital improvements, which can be used in preparing our capital budget for the coming budget cycle and to assist us with securing grant funding. Prioritizing of projects is typically done at budget adoption as the resources for funding are better identified. So projects are prioritized based on the needs, plans, and funding for the project. Selection of projects for the CIP does not follow a one-size-fits-all priority setting process. Common priorities among the programs is safety, first and foremost, followed by maintaining existing infrastructure and addressing new demands. Projects are competing for funding, whether it's restricted funding, grants, or even general fund. The CIP is a living document, so there are a lot of moving pieces affecting the prioritization, mainly funding availability. Projects listed in the first 2 years are considered budget-ready projects and have been prioritized by that program area. These projects in the first 2 years of the CIP become the basis for preparation of the city's annual capital budget. Capital funding sources include general fund, which accounts for activities and services traditionally associated with governments, such as police, fire, parks and rec, and library. And these are financed primarily through tax-generated revenues. We have our enterprise funds generated from user fees. This includes airport, downtown parking, water, wastewater, and waterfront. And then we have our internal service funds. And these are funds received by departments to pay for services provided by other departments. And these include building maintenance, fleet replacement, as well as information systems. Our designated funds are also included, and those are voter-approved taxes that are designated for specific types of projects, such as Measure A, designated for streets projects. And then we have grants, debt issuance, or loans. So the table before you is the first 2 years of the CIP broken out by funded or unfunded projects. Projects included here are considered the budget-ready projects or identified as a critical need. We've also included an estimate of general fund Measure C funding to be allocated during budget. For the purpose of the CIP, these funds are considered unfunded. So combined, funded and unfunded projects total roughly $887 million, and this is over the 5-year planning period, including the future needs. Approximately 38% of total funding is funded, or that blue piece of $335 million, while unfunded projects total approximately $552 million, represented by the orange pieces, and that includes the general fund and Measure C, as we mentioned in the previous slide. It's estimated approximately $23 million annually, or $138 million over the life of the document. So let's separate out the funded and unfunded pieces and take a closer look. So our funded projects total almost $335 million. Most significant amounts are water and wastewater, represented by the blue and the gray pieces, for a total of $170 million. This includes enterprise funds as well as our state revolving fund loans. We have grants from various sources totaling $53 million. Our streets projects include funding sources such as Measure A and utility users tax, and that totals approximately $39 million. And then we also have airport, which includes enterprise funds and FAA funds, for a total of $29 million. We do have other funded projects throughout the various programs, such as parking, facilities, and waterfront. So our unfunded projects total about $552 million. And we have a large amount of unfunded projects seeking grant opportunities, about $171 million, and that's the red piece. Since there is uncertainty associated with the successful grant acquisition, these projects are considered unfunded for the purpose of the CIP. Our Measure C and general fund projects total about $124 million. General fund projects at $103 million. And we have an anticipated debt issuance for the new police station of $95 million. And this is our best estimate, since our final cost will be dependent upon a variety of factors. We have identified 295 projects in the draft CIP, of which 80 are new projects. Our Administrative Services Division will be upgrading the data center at Fire Station 1 with the intent to make it the city's primary data center. They will also be purchasing time clocks to interface with the new time and attendance system, and these projects have both been indicated as a high priority for them. Airport will be addressing some needs outlined by the Airport Master Plan and maintaining their pavement management program. A high priority project for the airport includes the rehabilitation of the northeast pavement, as well as the Goleta Slough mouth management program, our project. So Creeks has identified 2 new high priority projects in the CIP, and these are consistent with the Creek Inventory and Assessment Study. Fire will be updating the Community Wildfire Protection Plan and the corresponding Programmatic Environmental Impact Report. These were completed in 2004, so they'll be addressing significant changes since then. Library will be renovating the Faulkner Gallery, which will address ADA compliance issues. And downtown parking will be addressing safety, security, cleanliness, and cost-saving measures in the various parking lots and structures. Priorities in this plan include long-term maintenance and repair of structures, especially the Libera Garage, which has been indicated as a high priority. So facilities continues to do a great job identifying needs at various city facilities to maintain the city infrastructure. All new projects listed here addressing general fund facilities, such as the fire facilities, as well as our parks and recreation buildings. Wastewater will be replacing the existing electrical distribution system at El Estero Wastewater Treatment Plant. The Harbor Master Plan, State Highlands Trust, ADA Transition Plan will guide the addition of the projects at Waterfront. Significant projects include the installation of additional lighting in the harbor main parking lot, as well as a remodel of Ledbetter restroom. Our streets projects include bike facilities, bridges, intersection improvements, corridor improvements, pedestrian enhancements, and maintenance. We present the CIP before the Planning Commission to also streamline our streets capital program review and approval process as required by the city's circulation element. One thing I do want to note here is we do have a duplicate project under bike facilities. The La Cumbre Junior High multi-use path along Modoc is the same as the Modoc multi-use path project, so we'll be deleting that. The Mission Canyon Bridge Safety Project, we've renamed this project as well. We've received a lot of public comment, so we wanted to draw some attention to this. We've hired a firm, an engineering and environmental firm, for the rehabilitation of Mission Creek Bridge. This includes the preliminary design, environmental work, community engagement, and it's anticipated to last about 3 years. The contract has been approved by council already. We do have staff here today to speak to any questions or anything regarding this project.
And I'd like to just invite Rob Dayton up to speak briefly to this project because I know you have a substantial number of people in the audience who are interested in that.
Madam Chair, Planning Commissioners, good afternoon, Rob Dayton. Yes, so the Mission Canyon Bridge Safety Project is definitely in one of the most sensitive areas of Santa Barbara and has had quite a bit of controversy on different community members wanting different things. And actually the Planning Commission was involved along with the County Planning Commission in putting this originally in the Capital Improvement Program. It's quite a different project since then, and Council has directed us to hire a firm to have a rich community outreach process, and to develop the design, which we don't know what it is yet, that would meet all the tests of this area. We have hired specifically not just engineers, but an environmental review team, and the environmental review team will be working together with the engineers to look at the lay of the land, the area, the historic, the richness of historic resources in the area that includes the bridge, and coming back in a public process to vet different alternatives. The goal is to try to come up with a project that would be have the least amount of impacts. All that will, when we're said and done, I'm talking 3.5 years, we'll be coming back to the City Council for a decision as to whether or not they want to actually move forward with whatever that project is. So we're available to answer any questions on that. I know that there's a lot of passionate people here, and rightly so, for this project is very a sensitive project.
Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Dayton, I understand that some historians, very respected historians, consultants have also been hired to work on the plan, so that the historic aspects of this project will be well reviewed. Is that correct?
Yeah, with a microscope, yeah. Ronald Nye is and another historian. They're both on the list for Historic Landmarks Commission's people who can write those studies. And of course, the Historic Landmarks Commission itself will have to give its blessing to any historic resources report that is written. So a lot of people at the table, a lot of eyes, a lot of careful planning to make sure that we have a good picture and lay a good foundation for council to make whatever decision they should make regarding this project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. No other questions from Mr. Dayton at this point? Okay. Thank you very much. And Ms. Velasquez, do you have more?
No, that concludes the presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Bjork. Appreciate the presentation. I'm going to go to, thank you very much, Mr. Busk. We have quite a few speakers. When you come up to the podium, you're limited to 2 minutes, so please keep your remarks within 2 minutes. There's a little timer up there. We appreciate your attendance here today. And I'll read the name, and then I'll read the next name, so you can be ready to come up after the first person speaks. Okay, so I'm opening public comment. The first speaker is Roger McClellan, and followed by Tom Jacobs. Roger McClellan, here, you come on up. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And when you speak, if you could put the mic close to your mouth, that just helps everyone, including anyone that's watching this on video or live. It just helps them hear better. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. McClellan.
I guess the mic is on now.
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. Anyway, my name is Roger McClellan. My wife is Marilyn. We've lived in the canyon over 50 years in the same location. My kids grew up in the canyon, and I have a daughter that walks it even today. She's pushing 60, almost on a weekly agenda. I'm dead against any so-called improvement to the Mission Canyon Bridge or that area. I think it's unique. I think it's why people like me are still here. I wish you would reconsider the allotment on the money, wherever it comes from, and put the money somewhere where it would be appreciated more and not objected by most residents. I guess that's pretty much it, and appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, Tom Jacobs, followed by Fred Sweeney.
Good afternoon. My name's Tom Jacobs. I am the chairman of the Safe Passage / Mission Heritage Trail Association. We have been supporting the discussion of this bridge project since 2011. So it's been quite a while. I would like to just make several points that they do not bear the passion of a 40-year-old resident, but I've been practicing architecture in town for 40 years as well. I think that above all, it should be remembered that this is not a museum piece. This is a functioning bridge. And as such, as part of our public infrastructure, it needs to be maintained, it needs to be analyzed, maintained, and appropriately modified when necessary. And the necessities are as follows. The bridge approaches from both north and south. In their current configuration are not safe for pedestrian traffic, nor is the configuration suitable for ADA accessibility federal law. The current non-conforming pedestrian access on the east side of the bridge is not accessible, and it's also of questionable structural integrity. It was put in 1930, and that's been quite a while. It's metal exposed, and that will be analyzed in the work that's being done to determine what kind of solutions we come up with. This is a potential choke point for any emergency that arises on any place in the foothills. This could be a very difficult place to pass through.
You're out of time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate it. Commissioner Higgins, did you have something?
Madam Chair, maybe we could get some clarification, and I don't want to throw any water on anybody's presentations or comments, because I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say, but our task here is not as a funding commission. Maybe staff could clarify that better than I can, at least on the spot here, but our task here is to find whether or not what's in this budget is consistent with our general plan, not so much pushing and pulling things out of a budget. I mean,
Madam Chair, Commissioner Higgins, that's correct. We're here for a very specific recommendation from you, which is that the projects that are added are consistent with the general plan policies and the policies of the city. And in fact, this project was previously included in the CIP. We brought it back again because it, as Mr. Dayton said, it has changed somewhat significantly in the focus from when it was first introduced and when Planning Commission last saw it, in that approach that was presented previously has changed, and we've also changed the name. So you have seen this project for consistency previously.
And the big change is the funding
No,
structure?
It's
or?
really going back through. The funding is still the Federal Highway Bridge Program, but really, I think one thing that has come to the table since the last time you saw this project is that we now have the availability of Measure C. So, should we decide to do, the Federal Highway Bridge Program has always told us they won't fund a standalone pedestrian bridge. We are willing to push them on that, and we'll see if we can get them there. But if we decided to do the bridge alignment in order to make space for a standalone pedestrian bridge, they would fund, we believe, that bridge realignment, which would be necessary for a standalone bridge or a bridge that accommodated all needs. So it's a more inclusive project than what we had considered before.
Thank you, Ms. Bjork, and thank you, Commissioner Higgins. Commissioner Higgins is right. We're here for a very specific purpose. And as Mr. Dayton did point out, this is council direction to initiate a contract to look at the components that Mr. Dayton talked about. So that being clear, we still would like to hear from you. So I'm going to continue with public comment now. Mr. Sweeney, you're up.
Thank
and
you.
You'll be followed by Roseanne Crawford.
Thank you, Chair and board members. I'm here as a member of the Mission Heritage Trail Association Safe Passage. Thank you, Mr. Higgins, Commissioner Higgins, for clearly understanding where we are in this process. I just wanted to share with you that I'm encouraged, ready to move forward to the dialogue. We know this is sensitive. The reason we decided to rename ourselves Mission Heritage Trail Association is we're terribly concerned about the historic and cultural nature of this canyon. As you know, we proposed separate pedestrian bridge so that we wouldn't touch the historic bridge. We still prefer that, but let's see where this goes. I've had a long career. All of this work that I've been doing since 2011 is volunteer. I'm glad to see that the Wallace Group has been hired. I worked with them when I was master planning the new campus for Cuesta College in Paso Robles, California. They were a keen member of my team, so I have experience working with them. We look forward to the dialogue that will be set into place, and I think we can ultimately find a safe way, and that's what this is all about, is safety, a safe way to continue to traverse that wonderful canyon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Roseanne Crawford, and you have, is Grace Wilson here? Okay, and you're giving your time to Ms. Crawford, right? Okay, great. So let me just reset this, please. You will have, you'll have 4 minutes, and welcome.
Thank you. Yes, Roseanne Crawford. I'm a resident of Mission Canyon area of over 30 years. I am also the originator of the Save Mission Creek Bridge MoveOn.org petition. I understand through your secretary that you've received the document, copies of that, all of you, with the 285 signatures to date. It speaks for itself. I want to thank all of you for what you do, sincerely. It's not an easy seat to be under the scrutiny of taxpayers in this community, regardless of their opinions, and thank you. I also want to thank the speakers here today. It's a huge effort to set our other commitments aside and to participate in a meeting like this. This is clearly a case of the tail wagging the dog. I hope process and facts will be honored by removing the city's review of the capital 5-year plan at this time in this area. This area is not included in the current pedestrian master plan, which is the master plan for the city. These are the facts. This is not what the city council approved. They voted funds for an environmental impact report and a preliminary concept design. There is no approved project. And thank you, Mr. Dayton, for clarifying that it will be about 3.5 years until there is something to approve or not approve by the City Council. So, having said that, no one has seen an environmental impact report or a review and has no place here. Public Works alleging this area is unsafe is absolutely false. There is no data to support this false statement. According to the police and sheriff's departments, the entire corridor from APS to Highway 192 is the safest in the city. It meets Vision Zero. No accidents on the bridge, and over several decades, only 2 minor single-vehicle, non-injury accidents involving a speeding issue where they lost control of the vehicle. This is a share-the-road corridor. Bicyclists have the same right as the cars on the road. There is already an existing pedestrian path that has not been well maintained. It's certainly wide enough to make ADA wheelchair compliant very easily. Perfectly usable, used daily with no incident. Thank you for considering the removal of this item at this time from the capital improvement program for the fiscal year 2020 to 2024.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, Paulina Kahn. Is Paulina Kahn here? You'll have 2 minutes, and you're followed by Lenny Epstein. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I agree with everything that Roseanne said. There is no safety issue here. The pedestrian bridge that Tom Jacobs talks about is inspected every 2 years along with the bridge. It is in perfectly good condition. There are a few holes in 2 of the supports that very easily repaired. This major project should never have come this far, and most of us were totally unaware of it when it came to the Planning Commission in the first place. I am asking you to remove this funding. As you probably saw in the application, there is much misinformation in the application. First, the drawing says we're going to increase the radii to match the 35 mile per hours in the county. That will create horrendous accidents at the bridge. If you widen the bridge, that too will cause accidents because cars will become speeders down Mission Canyon Road. Then this drawing says after he has created the 35 mile an hour radii, he's going to reduce those radii so that you can't go faster than 25. Any increase in the radii of these curves is going to increase speeds. Right now, nobody can go faster than 25 miles per hour. That is absolutely wonderful. It's a Vision Zero priority, and we can fix the pedestrian access. The bridge is already wide enough. All we have to do is put a 5-foot landing for ADA. There are solutions to the east side access to the bridge, this bridge too, and the Coalition to Preserve Mission Canyon has been working on it, and we will be having a plan for you. And this area needs local funding, not state and federal funding that are going to ruin all our historic and environmental resources. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Lenny Eberstein, followed by Rich Unterman. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, members of the Commission. Thank you for your service to our community. Well, this is obviously an issue that's going to be of continuing interest until it's ultimately resolved. And I hope that every member of this commission will oppose the demolition of Mission Creek Bridge. And I want to say that early on in terms of processes have a way of taking on a life of their own. And that's not the intention now, but what if we can't do something without demolishing that bridge? And for people to say, no, that could never happen, if it could never happen, then say now you'll oppose that. That would be really helpful. And if people aren't willing to say that they oppose that, as the Mission Heritage Trails Association is unwilling to say, what they're really saying is, let's set up a project, a process, we'll see where it winds up, and if it's demolition of the bridge, that's what we'll support. I think that it's inconsistent with the city general plan and the other mandates that are before you, and for that reason, it's appropriate to have another meeting and discuss this in depth. I thought that the comment from staff that the current proposal is more inclusive was to some extent an understatement. It's a totally different plan, so you've never really considered it before. And that makes it worthwhile to have another meeting where you talk about it. It's a very important project. And however the process is structured, when the proposal comes forward that Mission Creek Bridge needs to be demolished, there's going to be a lot of interest in that. And people will say, why didn't we have that discussion earlier on? I think that even if demolition proves to be unnecessary, which is an open question, the widening of the bridge by 10 feet and the reconfiguration of the roads would be inconsistent with the historic nature of the area and existing city landmarks. So I hope you will consider having another meeting at which you'll discuss this issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Rich Unterman, followed by our final speaker, Lorna Moore. Welcome, sir.
Hello, thank you. I live with my family on Glennstar Lane. We walk this every day, my wife and I, in the afternoon. I bike it 3 or 4 times because I have a business downtown. I've never felt any danger at all. I've been studying pedestrians for 50 years. I wrote my first book in 1975. I think a lot about pedestrian safety. One of the things that we always think about in this is the using danger to create safety idea, which means that you've got to take care of yourself, right? So if it looks a little bit dangerous and you're walking, you'll be more careful. This place has that. Like most of Seattle, about half of Seattle has no sidewalks. You share the road. Parking lots throughout the city and county are without sidewalks. Everybody knows how to walk in a place where there are cars. This particular plan assumes that this is going to be like the enclosed Paseo Nuevo, where there's nothing that's going to happen to you. There's always going to be something that's going to happen to you. Our group, I've been working with these wonderful neighbors for a while now, has a plan that'll cost maybe $100,000, but let's say it costs $1 million. Take the $10 million last, knock the last zero off, and you save the city or the state or whoever $9 million. You have a plan that will produce the most beautiful, rural, historic, scenic route in Santa Barbara, guaranteed. You can put it on the map. You can have people go there and walk. People will be able to walk from the Mission, cross the street safely, go through the historic Mission Park, then walk on past the alligators in the creek on that side, through this crinky little thing, and enjoy it. Say hello to someone who's going by, because you have to go like this to let them pass. All of those things are wonderful for our city. They're soft, they're malleable. Your concern for the budget should be about saving $9 million. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, final speaker, Lorna Moore. Come on up. Welcome.
Hi, I'm a little bit new to this. I'm originally from Pasadena and wasn't very connected in the community, but when I heard about this, I was just shocked. We in Pasadena we put a lot of effort into preserving our historic resources we had, and I just thought, how can Santa Barbara be talking about this realignment? That's a nice word for widening. The realignment makes it straighter. Cars go faster. I was a traffic commissioner in the city of Pasadena, and I know something about transportation. We're very lucky to have these mountains above us because that limits the capacity problem. There's no vehicle capacity problem here. There's no safety problem if you read all the police and sheriff accident reports. And people have been walking that bridge for, 100 of years and no problem. No one's been hit. I heard of one guy who got hit by a bike, or he got, sort of was edged over. And I talked to him and I said, if this is straightened and widened, you probably wouldn't be alive right now because that car would have been going faster. Right now, you are forced physically to get down to 25 miles per hour with the way the bridge is configured. And I just think once you start spending money on this, I know how projects go. It just takes on a life of its own. And I really disagree that the project has changed radically without revisiting the community. Nobody even knows this is going on but a few of us. And I think it's the city's bridge, not just this district. It's the city's historic resource. and the whole city should be involved in this decision. I think it's a tragic, expensive mistake, and you're going to kill Santa Barbara one tragic, the goose that laid the golden egg, one tragic, expensive mistake at a time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and I thank you all for your comments, and thank you for coming. But do keep in mind that we're here for consistency with the general plan, conformance with the general plan. So I want the record to reflect that at last count, I think I have 22 letters plus a 32-page petition signed by one of the speakers said 285 signatures. I didn't actually count them, but there were 32 pages of petitioner names and additional comments. So the public record should also reflect that. And with that, I'm closing public comment, and it's back to the commission for, let's start with questions, and then we'll move to discussion. Yes, Commissioner Jordan, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple questions. I think, Mr. Dayton, while you're up there, the item that's on the new list of the 80 projects, the access control system upgrades, is that, I read through the description and you're off on transportation talk or parking talk, but is that the upgrades that would be considered to what we call put the gates down all night at the parking lots and give us some other options on shared parking?
Yes, Madam Chair and Commissioner Jordan, that's the closed loop system, so the gates down 24/7.
Okay. Super. Happy to see that on there. And then, Ms. Bjork, I know you're just waiting for this because you get beat up by me every year. And it has nothing to do with today's decision, but I'm at a loss on what staff describes as have been prioritized by that program area, considering they're listed in the first 2 years and considered budget ready. My staff report didn't have any of those little pink highlights jumping on them, and I'm still I'm okay. Been doing this a long time with you, but I'm okay if it's just not going to get any better. But I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything on here. So, for example, in the 80 new projects, I don't see anything there that jumps out and tells me that the update to the community wildfire protection plan is more important than the access controls in a parking garage, which is kind of what I'm looking for. And so it doesn't exist. Is that that type of prioritization?
Chair, excuse me, Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Jordan, that's a great example for why we don't prioritize 1, 2, 3, 4, because the funding source for the environmental, for the update to the wildfire plan, and the funding source for the access control to the parking garage are completely different, so they aren't competing with each other.
So in the cases where you do have projects on this list and the rest on the big document, the 350-page document, that are competing for the same dollars, is it just unreasonable to continue to ask you to look for ways to show a prioritization for those competing dollars?
No, it's not unreasonable, and that's what we have attempted to do by the projects that are in the first 2 years of the budget for the general fund are the top, and by general fund that's both general fund and Measure C general fund, are the top priorities by the departments. But of course, Mr. Casey will allocate the recommendation for funding for those. So at this point in time, even if it's our top priority, it may not get funded. And I think the police station that we're now proceeding on is a perfect example of that. That's been a very high priority project in the city for a couple of decades, and yet the magnitude of the funding needed was such that even though it was probably higher priority than some of our other projects, it still didn't get funded. So it's a difficult piece. We also get a lot of leverage out of this document for our grant applications. If you saw from the amount of money that we have allocated, already funded in grants, as well as how much we anticipate we will get, it's a great document to support those applications, and we are benefited by not having them prioritized, because if we get a grant that will fund our 5th priority but won't fund 1 through 4, the grantor, it's still a priority for us, the granting agency doesn't think, oh, this is a low priority project for the city of Santa Barbara.
So reading between the lines, what I think you're really telling me is this document, the big document or this little document, isn't really the tool to show that prioritization that you and I keep talking about every year. And because it's subject to so many other variables and also political will, correct?
That's correct. And I think
Okay.
the best place that happens is within each of the programs and
Right.
at the commissions. For those that have control over their funding, the enterprise funds, those are more easily prioritized, but even those priorities change.
Yep, I get that. Okay, thanks so much. And thanks for putting up the same question every year.
It's a good question. We keep struggling with it. Maybe we'll get an answer someday.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Jordan. Commissioner Schwartz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you want all our questions right now or just in specific
Please,
topic areas?
yeah, go ahead with all your questions, yeah.
So, Ms. Bjork, first to you. Is there a general education, kind of explanation education you could provide all of us in and this is, I'm thinking about a comment that one member of the public asked in terms of trying to get a particular project just funded locally versus also with state and or federal funds. Are there different thresholds of rigor and what do I want to say, kind of statistically fact-based requirements as we move up from local to state to federal, whether it's on the engineering level or any other considerations? It also might tie to our general plan policies, because I think that's, in my mind, that's an overarching question for me, not being a funding decision maker, but nonetheless looking for general plan consistency.
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Schwartz, that's a really good question. Thank you. It's very difficult because our objective as the people putting together these projects is, one, to meet our maintenance needs as well as possible, and two, to provide improvements to the community that we've identified through our boards, commissions, and our day-to-day work, and through the entrance of council. The thresholds for funding are as different as the funding source. So there are some funding that is just allocated, and an example of that would be our highway bridge program. If you have a bridge that meets the threshold of needing a safety replacement, they can give up to 100% funding allocation. That does a lot. All of our bridges will eventually need to be replaced. A bridge doesn't go forever without needing replacement. We have a lot of 100-year-old bridges in the city. We've been extremely successful in getting federal funding to replace those bridges, which means local funding remains available to do other things. Before 2007, 17, when Measure C was passed, we had on average $1 to $1.5 million a year for capital improvement across the city. We had over $500 million in unmet general fund need for maintenance projects. So maintenance of what we already have remains a very high priority. Unfortunately, grant funding for maintenance is seldom provided. The bridges are an exception. We don't usually get grant funding for maintenance, so that has been always a priority for general fund. Okay. Then there's also, you can leverage some grants against other grants, which is something that our staff are extremely good at doing. And then knowing what kinds of projects will be available for grants and carefully looking for those grants in order to best, again, stretch our local dollars to meet all of the community needs, so that we can try to meet those overarching objectives of keeping what we have safe and improving what we can.
Okay, thank you. Then to some specific project questions. From the PowerPoint presentation, I think, Ms. Velasquez, this may be for you. Slide 11, I want to see if I heard you correctly. This is unfunded projects on slide 11. And in the mustard yellow colored portion of the pie, this is $95 million. Did you say that the $95 million is specifically for the new police headquarters, police station headquarters?
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Schwartz, yes, that is correct. That's our anticipated needs for the police station.
Am I not recalling correctly? This sounds like the number has been raised again from just last year. Is that correct? Are we seeing some escalating figures there?
Chair Schwartz, at this point, we really don't know what that number will be because we don't have a site even chosen, let alone begun design. The estimate is basically trying to take the estimate that was done when they were looking at rebuilding the existing police station at its current location in 2012, adjust it for inflation and adjust it for unknowns. So the 95 and the 80 million, which was the number that was a couple of years ago, are probably really, in terms, I know it's a big difference in funding, but they have about the same level of accuracy at this point in time until we get further into that process. I do further want to clarify that we fully expect to issue debt for that, so it won't be a one-time cost. It will be a ongoing debt payment in the range of, at 95, it would probably be $8 to $10 million a year.
Okay, I'll address that further in my comments, and then I want to just go through my questions of some of these specific projects. I have a question on the airport industry. Doesn't matter. I'm sorry, staff. I don't know who's kind of going to come up for this, so I apologize. But this is pertaining to the airport. I'm looking. I don't think we have page numbers. That would. So I'm sorry. Without page numbers, this is the airport industrial area specific plan update. And my only question here, Mr. Bermond, is I didn't know if this was a typo or I was misunderstanding. In the status paragraph or description, there's a sentence that reads, the current specific plan provides a vision with a build-out year of 2010. Is that right, 8 years ago? A vision going back, we're kind of behind the 8 ball in that sense?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Schwartz, the current airport industrial specific plan was adopted in 1998. That's the specific plan that governs the north side of the airport north of Hollister Avenue.
I see. Okay.
So that was adopted in 1998, and it had a vision out to the year 2010. And so that's out of date. That's why we've included in here as,
very
as
good.
needing
I just
to be
wanted
updated.
to better understand that. Thank you. I think that's my only question on the airport. Then on the Faulkner Gallery renovation, is someone here who could speak to the library, my library question? And the question that I'm going to have as staff is coming up, it's not just pertaining to this item, which is entitled Central Library Faulkner Gallery renovation, but it's a larger question across a number of projects. There's a reference to this project covering or remedying ADA compliance. And I don't know if you can speak to this or it has to go back to Ms. Bjork, but not just on this project, but we have a number of ADA compliance requirements that kind of flow through quite a number of our projects. My overarching question there is, are we required, federally, are we required to address ADA on a project-by-project basis only when the project comes forward? Or is this going to be part of a much larger inventory, shall we say, of all of our city buildings and our ADA compliance status?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Schwartz, I'm Mike Wiltshire, the Facilities and Energy Manager. To speak on ADA, we are required to meet ADA compliance when we do a major project at a building or a facility. We are additionally, in 2007, there was a transition plan study completed, which kind of outlined, it was our roadmap to ADA compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do dedicate some funds specifically to ADA compliance, which go just towards that on a straight one-on-one basis. But when we do a project like a renovation at the library, a good example would be the Children's Library, which we just completed.
Right.
We are required by code to bring the area that we do complete the work on up to ADA compliance. So all of these projects that are in the CIP have some ADA compliance component kind of baked into them.
Yes, I noticed that. Do we receive or are we eligible for federal funding to help us bring our buildings into ADA compliance? Do we get any assistance there from
Typically,
a federal
no.
funding
Typically,
stream?
no.
So that's on us locally.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to fold that in and bear the burden, in a sense, to comply with a federal requirement in that regard.
That's true.
Is that right, Ms.?
Yes, Commissioner Schwartz, the only place that we've been successful in getting funding is the Community Development Block Grant funding for disadvantaged, and we have targeted that towards access ramps to try and improve the accessibility in disadvantaged census zones. And we've been quite successful in funding that through that mechanism, but that's generally less than a couple $100,000 a year. It's a very small amount.
Yeah, that is small. Okay. Thank you very much. I don't think I had any other. I apologize, even though I asked about the library, I thought it had larger applicability. My next question is regarding downtown parking and the State Street Plaza Maintenance Annual Repair Program. I don't know if anybody can speak to this. I'm wondering here, good afternoon, Mr. Garza.
Good afternoon.
I'm wondering if this is part of a larger project. I don't know if I see it referenced here in terms of the revitalization of downtown and kind of a more comprehensive project that the city will be undertaking from retaining a consultant to look into that. We all know there was media coverage on that this week. And so where does this program and project fit into that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Schwartz, that's a great question. So downtown parking has been part of the team that you mentioned to revitalize State Street. And included in that is, the change of my title to oversee the work that the downtown organizations, crews, and their contractors are doing to power wash. We've hired contractors with Measure C money to repair the brick sidewalks. We're looking at all the electrical components, the drinking fountains,
Did you say that Measure C money has already been allocated as part of this annual repair work downtown?
Yes, we've already performed all the work that was done on the east side of Carrillo Street was done with Measure C money and managed by downtown parking.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to comment on?
Just that it's an ongoing effort, and we're working with engineering to make sure that we share the money equally and take care of the problems as they arise and try
then
to do some
hopefully
preventive.
fold that into, as you're saying, this kind of multifaceted collaborative group that's working on revitalization and whatever will come out of both the consultants' recommendations along with, I'm sure there'll be many more public hearings because the public's so keen on participating in what's going on in our desired transformations downtown.
That's right. We're very actively involved in that team.
Ms. Bjork, did you want to further add to that?
Commissioner Schwartz, not much in that I think that team's just getting going on its efforts. We don't have what I heard you asking for as a project as a revitalization, sort of a refurnishing of State Street, if you will. That is not in our current plan.
I noticed that.
It might be something that would come out of that process.
Okay, very good. Let's see here. Then moving on to, where do I want to go next? I'll keep going. Excuse me, this is just in sequence in our packet. The next is the parking lot annex yard lot repave. And I wasn't sure if I knew the specific address for this. Is this down on Yananali? Is that what we're referring to?
Could you just tell us which section you're on
Well,
at the
that's
top,
good. Public
top
Works
right?
Facilities.
Thank you. That's
Thank you, ma'am. Again, maybe we could get have it paginated next time. It might be easier to reference. Public Works Facilities, parking lot dash annex yard lot repave. Could you confirm, first of all, the address? Because my question was going to reference the yard on Yananali, but I'm not sure this is the right page for that.
Yeah, Chair Wiscom and Commissioner Schwartz, that is the site.
It is
the
that property.
City annex yard on Yananali.
Okay. So then my question here is, I know this is just on repaving, but the Planning Commission has been privy to a number of projects in this area that revealed significant soil contamination. We all know this in that general area of our city. So I'm wondering, in repaving, is there, and I don't know if it's anywhere else in our packet, is there any larger project to, I don't want to say before we continue to just pave over what could be contaminated soil, but what are we doing to test the soil before we continue to repave over it, not knowing the potential adverse environmental impacts?
Typically with an asphalt repave like that, we're not going to the depths where we're even getting into that sort of soil. So part of the project doesn't require us to soil test or even disturb any of that soil.
I understand. Okay, I'll leave it at that. I could talk more about that, but We're just doing light questions right now. Let's see here. So, to this momentous project where so many members of the public have come out today and sent us written communication, the Mission Canyon Bridge Safety Project, that's in the Public Works Street / Transportation section. A number of members of the public have referenced this project as significantly changing. Could Mr. Dayton or Ms. Bjork just give us an overview of, is that correct? Is that characterization correct? And what do we have before us today, even in this synopsis, versus perhaps what the Planning Commission what was introduced to us a few years ago? And you'll recall, I think you were there, Mr. Dayton, we had a joint hearing early on concept with the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission as this community discussion and the work really just commenced in its infancy. Can you give us a little primer on that and then bring us current?
Yes, I can. And actually, Director Bjork went over that a little bit. But
yes,
originally when we were looking at it, we weren't going to adjust the bridge whatsoever. We were looking at getting grant monies to build a separate pedestrian bridge on the westerly side of the existing bridge. And we couldn't get that grant, and so we kind of put down our pencils and moved on. But then the state of California found some deficiencies with the existing Mission Canyon Bridge. And so those deficiencies include width, and they include the radii that are coming onto the bridge on approach. And so we put before council the question as to whether they wanted to pursue that funding. Given the fact that the community process, one of the most resounding things we heard was to not touch the bridge. The council made the decision that they did, in fact, want to at least go through the exploratory process, environmental and preliminary design, to figure out if it could be done in a way that honors the environment and the historic resources.
If I could ask you, Mr. Dayton, so when the state of California makes a determination, this is, I think, for our collective education, when the state makes a determination, is this Caltrans or is this, yes, Caltrans, makes a determination that there's a deficient structure, bridge in this case, what are our obligations, number one, what are our legal obligations in terms of safety and then related projects to remedy a safety deficiency? Just in brief, if you could describe that for us.
I'll start and see if the attorney wants to. She's jumping on it.
Right. Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Schwartz. The city has governmental immunities, so even though a bridge might be identified as requiring by the state as being deficient, we do have governmental immunities with regards to if there was something that happened or an accident, then that's what we rely on. But with regards to prioritizing when it gets done, then that falls to the Public Works Department to, and funding to know when that needs to happen.
Okay. My only other question to staff on this project right now, because you know we have very limited scope of consideration today, but general plan policy consistency is certainly a primary for us. From Exhibit J in our document, which outlines or identifies the general plan policies for us to consider today, are there any in particular, either Mr. Dayton or Ms. Bjork, that that you would recommend we focus on in terms of the finding of consistency? And I can hand this document back over if it's not handy.
As it specifically relates to the Mission Canyon Bridge?
Yes, please, yes. Yeah, just this one project that I was asking you about.
I think the general tenor of the policies that we have in there are dealing with safety and transportation connectivity and the various modes and forms of transportation, and all of them touch this particular project. This has been the narrative, whichever side you're on the narrative, is to whether or not this area meets the policies of the city of Santa Barbara, specifically in the general plan. And that question has not been answered. Like I said, there's differences of opinion. And the question the council's set forth for us to answer is, can those policies be implemented with design while still honoring the environment, the historic nature
the
of the area.
balancing.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, one more question from the sheet that we have on this project. I see that the structure, the bridge built in 1891, is eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. Where does that research fall in general within this, since I'm familiar with what happened, the requirement, the obligations going forward when something is placed on the National Register, and their significance. So I was wondering how that folds into the follow-on work that staff has been directed to do by council.
That process of putting it on the National Register is in process, and
it is right as we.
Some of the members of the community that are here today are involved and engaged on doing that. I will say the city has not been pursued that generally because the landmark status that is already on the bridge by the city of Santa Barbara is a much stronger preservation tool than the National Registry. So the National Registry will be a great recognition for the bridge, but the standards by which we judge a landmark are much more strict than the National Registry.
Okay. I don't know that I noticed that, Mr. Dayton, in the synopsis here about the bridge being on the city's. Perhaps that would be an important statement to include.
We can add that.
Okay, thank you. I think I just have two more questions. Thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair. Then public works street / transportation intersection improvements : Olive Mill roundabout. The community and this commission has followed first in concept, and now it's moving to design this project very closely. Do you have a timeline for? Oh, thank you. And can you tell us your name, please?
Sure. Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Schwartz, my name is Amanda Falessi. I'm the principal engineer in Streets Engineering.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for being here today. Can you give us a sense, especially for the public, those who might want to follow along and participate, what the general timeline is then on design and public participation?
Sure. Olive Mill Roundabout is a mitigation measure for the HOV lanes for the 101. So now that SB1 was approved, the 101 expansion can move forward. So SBCAG has really taken the lead on this, since they are the lead on the expansion, and we have been working together with the county and Caltrans, and we are moving forward to hold a joint planning commission of our city and the county, and we've actually done a few public outreach for the Olive Mill already, and provided comments to both Caltrans and SBCAG in the design efforts.
Okay, thank you. And then I think my last question for now is, this may be to our police department. Do we have someone here who can speak to public works, street / transportation, pedestrian enhancement, crosswalk improvements? Would that just be still public works and not? And my question is enforcement. I know that's not our direct purview today, but what I just, if I could just, let me just continue on here. I'm very encouraged by our crosswalk improvements, and I know we do some random enforcement. I myself recently have experienced some very scary near misses, me personally, in putting the light on, starting to cross, and cars not stopping. So while I think we're doing a heroic effort to improve our infrastructure and our the safety of our crosswalks, I'm looking into the audience to see, I don't think we have anyone here from our police department, but this goes out to them. Let me just say, I'd really like to see more regular periodic enforcement testing of it. Oh, here we have an officer coming in. I think we need to remind the community of these improvements. It may just be oversight. Somebody may not be familiar with the improvements that have gone in. I'm thinking in particular, I'll tell you where there's a problem on De La Vina, up at just above Alomar. What's that smaller cross street there? It's just before Los Agaves on the left side. We have a shopping center on the right, and there's this wonderful new improvement that's gone in there. Cars regularly go through the light as the pedestrian has pressed the light or is actually now crossing De La Vina. So I think we have a ways to go, and we just need to continue to remind the community that these have gone into place and they're very serious. And we're taking them very seriously because, as we know, Vision Zero, and that's nicely folded into our packet today, is front and center as part of the council's focus on improvement, pedestrian, bicycle, vehicular improvement. So thank you for that. I know I slid into a comment there, but since I wanted to talk about that because it's top of mind for me. So thank you, Madam Chair. Those are my questions for now.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwartz. Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My concerns are on the page headed fire. It's the one page that's headed fire, and it's after airport. And that is about the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And I'm glad to see it here, but I am not glad to see it for next year, for the following year, rather than as soon as possible. One of the major things for the general plan is public safety, and we've seen recently, as it says here, their new approaches, tools, and solutions are available and needed to address continued drought, climate change, and fire frequency. And we've certainly seen that happen locally. And the fire marshal has come up, and our new fire chief is also in the audience. So I'd like to hear what they have to say about this. Thank you.
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Lodge, and for the commission as a whole, if you haven't met him, I do bring a new fire chief, Eric Nickel, with me, and he may have some comments of his own here. I wanted to address a couple of things about our wildland fire plan, or our CWPP, as they call it, Community Wildfire Protection Plan, and that is that it's a right now kind of thing. It's, you know, we have had it as a CWPP, as a CIP this year. But we've made a couple of false starts at it, and due to funding and so forth. And we've already started on alternative funding sources. In fact, I think I came to this commission a couple of months ago and mentioned that we were attempting a CAL FIRE grant. We completed that grant process. We submitted it on the 19th of December, and we should find out on the 19th of March whether or not we are going to achieve that funding. It's going to be substantially more than what you look at on your sheet. We now estimate that it's going to cost in the area of $450,000 to complete the project. And as we mentioned back then, too, you have to keep in mind that it comes with a programmatic EIR, which is highly advantageous to us. As you know, we have the assessment district where we go out and do some of the work with the community involving private property owners, public property, and so forth. And the EIR allows us to go do this work without having to get a separate CEQA analysis for each and every project that we go out and do. So we basically lay out the entire thing, including our neighboring jurisdictions, the public lands that are county, that are Montecito, that are Forest Service, and state, what we call the SRA, the state responsibility areas. And we incorporate an acknowledgement and working together with those other communities and other districts so that we have a more of a holistic community plan. Now, this is, again, is the time where we address all of these concerns, and the time where we, first of all, start with expert opinions, so consulting firms that give us the groundwork for it. Then we bring it back to staff. Staff has input, including community development and planning and so forth. And then, of course, we have the public meetings. And as you know, when we have public meetings on the wildland issues, we get a great deal of very knowledgeable input. Our community in the wildland areas are very savvy about wildland issues. This process will take some time. The entire process that the CAL FIRE grant would allow us is up until 2022 to complete the entire scenario. So that's what we're working on now. But of course, if we had the money today, we would start it today. And in fact, we are starting to outline what we need in the way of, how we're going to issue RFPs for this project and what we need to outline for the consultant that we ultimately hire. I hope that helps a little bit in the understanding where we are. But to us, it's an emergent right now kind of thing.
Well, and you would like to see the funding come sooner rather than later, I assume.
Immediately would be nice.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Wiscombe and the entire commission. My name is Eric Nickel. I'm your fire chief, brand new. This is my fourth day on the job. Okay. Let me take us up to a strategic level. From my perspective of doing this job for 31 years, this is the single biggest threat that the community faces is the threat of wildfire. And one of the things that makes me very nervous is our current plan. It's 2004. And having been doing this for 31 years, I can tell you the fires are burning very differently now than they were 14 years ago or even 30 years ago. The fact that we are making deployment decisions on or around Christmas for the Thomas Fire, which was at the time the largest wildland fire in the state of California, should cause people to open their eyes and say, wow, what is going on? Climate change is here and our forests are behaving very differently. We've done a huge amount of work at the state level to bring in additional funding from the state level under the previous administration with Governor Brown. New Governor Gavin Newsom was also very forthright. One of his very first things he did said we need to fund this even more, not just the preventative measures, the prepositioning measures, but studying the forests and the fuels and what we can do about it. We're ready to go right now, and this will be a very significant theme, certainly of my tenure here, is protecting this community from the threat of wildfire. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself and share a little philosophy on community wildfire protection.
Thank you, and a welcome to Santa Barbara. Well, I just hope that I would like to see the commission include a recommendation to the City Council that funding of this wildfire master plan update be moved up to immediately, preferably, as was said. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you. For the staff, our task here today has been mentioned several times is to evaluate this laundry list of capital projects and see that it conforms to the general plan. So with that in mind, we were given this basket of about 80 projects. But several of these projects, to me, do not seem to be capital projects. Capital, as you state in the staff report, deals with fixed assets. So I wonder how we justify including plans and tree pruning in the parking lot. As was mentioned with the airport, the update of the plan is important, and I agree. As was just discussed, and I agree completely with Commissioner Lodge, the wildland plan, fire plan should be updated immediately, but I doubt that it qualifies as a capital project. So how do you justify putting these kind of projects that are not a fixed asset that can be depreciated over time on a capital list like this?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Thompson, that speaks to the nature of the plan that we have, and that it's a good question in differentiation between what truly is a capital asset and how we plan to spend our capital budget. For something like the Wildland Fire Plan, which is a very expensive project, it's very hard to accommodate large one-time projects like that into the ongoing annual budget. Instead, the city has had a practice for large expenditures that are infrequent, just funding those from capital funding allocations. They are not managed as capital assets in the accounting that the finance department does. They do only, so there is you've made a very good distinction between the way that we use this plan, which is really to plan how we use that unallocated resource that's not an operation dollar, even though some of that goes to what are technically operational issues.
So you're saying that even though they may be on this so-called capital improvement plan, things like survey of sandstone walls and survey of parking lot boundaries and titles, which are on the plan here, are actually categorized differently by finance once the expenditures actually happen?
Actually, for those two, I don't think they would be, because that's really the preliminary planning work that we would do in order to create the projects that would be needed to maintain those assets. So they do go to the value and maintaining the value of the capital asset. As you know, and having just talked about the historic Mission Canyon, we have some very tall sandstone walls up there that are, I'm sure, equally old, and we need to ensure that they continue to protect the public property and the private property. So that would actually be preliminary planning work that will be a part of that overall asset value.
Yeah, I'm not questioning the need for these, and as I mentioned, the Wildland Fire Plan, I strongly support what Commissioner Lodge said. If we can move the funding up to immediately, if not sooner, but I'm only questioning that we're categorizing them properly from a financial point of view.
I appreciate that. I think it's a good point, and we will make a point in the document to call out the fact that the inclusion of planning for things such as the Wildland Fire Plan is really more of a funding mechanism than a capital mechanism, and it does not reflect the manner in which the funds are managed by the accounting. I think that's a good suggestion. So we will add that into our document to reflect that.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question. I see my friends from the airport here, so I'll ask Mr. Berman to answer a question, or two questions actually. There are two items on here from the airport that I was actually kind of a little bit surprised to see. I know we've been doing this, but the issue about the slough and having a pump and a piping system to drain the slough down, wouldn't it be simpler and a hell of a lot cheaper just to bulldoze out some of the sandbar when it builds up?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Thompson, yes, it would be considerably cheaper, but it would also be a potential violation of the Endangered Species Act. The Goleta Slough is habitat for the tidewater goby and the steelhead trout, and so we have to complete a number of regulatory requirements in engaging with those federal agencies.
Yeah, but it just seems like the net result is the same thing, only one is a more expensive way to accomplish the same result.
That's correct, and the more expensive way allows you to control the water level more precisely.
Well, that's true.
And that is minimizes the impacts of the endangered fish.
Okay, so I can't save us any money there.
I would like to, but I don't know that that's possible.
Okay, the other one was, I was a little surprised to see that we're already talking about planning for terminal expansion. And it seems like the passenger count has just begun to start getting back to where it was with the 2008 downturn. Do we already think that we're going to need to start building the additional terminal? I know it's on the future, which is more than 5 years out, but...
Right, that's correct, Commissioner Thompson. We're looking at probably a 5 to 10-year horizon there. Originally, when we designed the airline terminal, we anticipated it handling capacity to the forecast year 2015. The forecast did not play out in reality the way the way it was envisioned. So we're now basically at a position where we're starting over with our forecast. We're back to where we were, say, 10 years ago. And again, we're looking at the fact that in a 5 to 10 year horizon, we would, based on the employment growth rate, exceed the capacity of the airline terminal.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Higgins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for Mr. Dayton, put you on the hot seat, I guess, on the bridge project. There's a number of things that I can't reconcile that I like independently, that I, especially after hearing from some of the community members about. safety and evacuation, and so perhaps the fire department will help us get to some sort of analytics in that regard for evacuation routes. But I also do appreciate the fact that it's traffic calming by design, knowing that in some neighborhoods in San Roque we have a lot of cars on the street, and that does slow some people down, except if they're going to Peabody at 8 o'clock in the morning. Those people don't go slow for anything. But so how do we get everything that we want in one capital project? Something that's this information that you just shared with us, that as the Caltrans has found that the radii don't work. That's a little bit new. And I understand what we're talking about here today may not necessarily relate to the design, because we're looking at a budget and not a design, so we don't have a project in front of us. But when we get to that point, how do we do it all? I was particularly intrigued by the gentleman that asked about the or the group that's been studying a pedestrian-only bridge. That seemed like a way to solve everybody's issues, with the exception of evacuation safety and sort of increased vehicle volume through that canyon. So in 25 words or less, tell us how you're going to solve everybody's problems.
Give me 27.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a word too many. In Public Works, we're always challenged because we have what the council wants to do and our policies point to, and then we have to learn how to figure out how to fund those things. And the reasons for the funding are not always congruent with the things that we want to do. Mission Canyon is a case in point. The things that the community wanted to solve, walking through the area, retaining the historic nature of the area, reducing the collisions. The collisions patterns in particular, the most predominant one is actually in the county, coming into the Stegosaurus wall at the K property. We have a collision that's a repeating pattern. So at Vision Zero, you've heard about us really being precise on repeated patterns. So we have a collision almost every single year into that wall. We also have a trend that's into the wall on the bridge going northbound, which is directly incongruent with the shorter, the radius is not as broad that the state is looking at. So we want to address the pedestrian issues. The council does. We want to address the pedestrian issues, and then we want to address the collision pattern. The money that we have to do all that is a state money. The state has other purposes and reasons. And so we're working. That's why we had a choice, and we struggled with the council. Do you want to accept this money to do this, to touch the bridge, when it wasn't something we had originally set out to do? But in fact, in the council's decision, we do get the money to explore, at least, if we can reasonably meet the objectives, the safety objectives and the pedestrian objectives that we had with the original project, with the current state monies that we'll get for the bridge.
So a lot of this, though, seems to come down to you didn't have. You'll part of your process will evaluate evacuation routes, or is that something the fire department will help you evaluate? Or is it just assume that the radii is going to improve that potential problem?
I don't think anyone's questioning the bridge as an evacuation route. I think the challenge when we've talked about that and now seeing the Montecito debris flow is what the Montecito is in the position where they have historic bridges, maybe not as nice as ours, but they have bridges now that they have to repair much faster than they would. They don't get the luxury of a community process. Mission Canyon Bridge is in that position too. So one point of view is that if we had a debris flow, which we've had in that area that created Rocky Neck Park, if we had that again and this bridge was taken out, we would be putting it back rather quickly to restore the evacuation route and restore the transportation benefit. So from one perspective, the point of view of having a community process that really looks at carefully how we would do this carefully, to have a bridge that would be able to sustain such a debris flow and retain the evacuation route is a good thing.
So back to what's before us, the general plan policies that are put in the appendix of our report or an attachment all relate to circulation and safety. And some are there for economic vitality and utilities, but there's no general plan policies there with respect to historic preservation. I know we have a pretty meaty chapter in our general plan with regard to historic preservation, but so I don't have any problem with the project being included in the budget now as it relates to these policies, but there are no historic preservation policies for us to look at as it relates to our findings today. And maybe that was done intentionally because without looking at an actual design or having the analysis, how are we supposed to make that determination? But that's not really a question. That's just sort of where I'm at. If you can help me with that, I'd appreciate it sometime before we get out of here.
Well, I'd just say that we've chosen general plan policies to look at, but of course it's the whole general plan you're finding. Yes, there are historic policies that are related to historic resources, and so in fact you're finding and consistent with those too. But just because we're doing a project, when we do a project, we also have to, upon doing it, follow all the general plan policies too. So I think that the community and the council recognize, and perhaps this commission as well, the weight of taking this road to see what could or cannot be done in this area while honoring all the policies.
So one last technical question about transportation. You couldn't solve some of the radii issues with actually taking a different direction in terms of physically, literally sharpening the radii and doing stop signs, or is that just is that introducing another set of problems that we'd have to solve at a later time?
Everything will be pursued, but again, the addressing the radii and the bridge width is what gets the money. So when we came to the city council with that decision, that's what they were really decided on. Do you want this pot of money that they'll be afford you the exploitation process at the state's cost to investigate those? So yeah, the answer is yes, there could be other solutions, but the solutions that get us the money are adjusting the radii.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. Did you have something to add, Commissioner Lodge? Yes.
Just a quick comment. Another way to look at the studies that are listed in the capital improvement project is that they are needed before we can do the improvements. So it seems to me they are quite justified in being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Okay, I just have a couple questions. Moving on, I absolutely agree with Commissioner Lodge. One of my red flags was this wildland fire plan, and I really think, and I guess my question regarding that, just to follow through with what Commissioner Lodge said, would council support, I don't know if Mr. Proay wants to answer this, but would council support, monetary support at this point, open up more grant funding for that, or open up other opportunities for you to get more money to start that more quickly than March?
Chair Wiscombe, I can't speak for other bodies, but I believe that any support that we get from council or from any other official body would give us more incentive and would give us a boost in terms of getting more funding.
So you might have more leverage to there. In other words, are there other funding sources that might be available to you with?
Correct.
With council support, monetary support for this plan?
That's correct. And if we don't get the CAL FIRE grant, we're seeking other funding. We're already looking at that.
Right, okay. Because usually with the grant funding, the monetary support of the city really kickstarts a lot of these grants. So,
and in fact, in our grant proposal to the CAL FIRE organization, we did use the fact that it is a CIP, that it's a very important city project, as part of the incentive for them to give us the grant.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. Well, I wish you a lot of luck on that, I hope.
Thank you.
Because that's, I think, as far as I'm concerned, that's a very top priority for the city.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I wanted to just talk for a minute about economy of scale. It's one of my kind of things I like to talk about, but I'm seeing a lot of small projects, and I could use the City Hall as example. Are we, I see a project here for this and another one for that. Are we looking at economy of scale? I assume we are on these projects. I saw a couple, one that dealt with plumbing, but they were different capital projects, and I don't even know if they were in different years. But can we get some economy of scale there?
Chair Wiscombe, yes, certainly, and that's something that Mike Wiltshire, who spoke to you earlier from facilities, works closely with the departments, and it comes partly, sometimes when you see projects split up between different budgets, it's partly because of the funding source. So facilities has an annual allocation that is given to them towards capital maintenance, and they worked to try and look. So for instance, if they were doing the project at the Faulkner Gallery, Mike would also look to see what modifications he had slated to do, whether the roof needed to be done, whether it was scheduled for recarpeting, whether it was scheduled for repainting, and Mike can speak to this better.
No, you're doing great. Chair Wiscombe, yeah, and one of the big things is in the past, our funding source was quite small, and so we could only chip away at these things a little bit at a time. And so now with Measure C, we're getting a little bit more of that. And so we have taken economies of scale in with some of these. So instead of doing a roof replacement here or some carpet and paint there, we are looking at kind of a whole building approach. And so City Hall was that. We're looking at totals in the range of a couple $100,000 as opposed to $20,000 and $30,000 little projects. So
good, yeah, because I think that really, whenever I've done projects, that's really helped.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. Well, that's great. I appreciate that. Thank you for that answer. And then my last question, I'm not sure who to go to for this, but, we're doing a sea level rise adaptation plan. And I'm looking at some of these projects, and I just picked out a few because they're in areas where, we will have issues with future sea level rise. Replacing Stearns Wharf Lift Station, Chase Palm Park buildings, Los Banos building. I'm not trying to pick on any department or any person, but are we really coordinating these kinds of capital improvement efforts with the our sea level rise predictions and with planning the people that are planning for the adaptation plan?
Yeah, Chair Wiscombe, as you know, right now they're doing the sea levels rise study, and then they will do the mitigation plan. Certainly, I can tell you from the public works infrastructure that we work on, and I know Ms. Zachary's here from Parks and Recreation, that as we consider our projects, particularly those in the lower areas, we're very aware of the fact that we need to be considering the impact of sea level rise. As you're aware, some of our infrastructure would be very, very difficult to move. For example, all of the water, sewer, and gas lines that are in Cabrillo Boulevard that are already below groundwater sea level, but then might in the future be underwater. So it's going to be a challenge, and I think it's important to note that right now we're still doing the study portion, that it's that mitigation and the approach plan that is going to be really important. But I know that all of the projects that we're looking at, as they come across my table, they are being considering that element in terms of how they're being approached.
Okay, because as we look at the mitigation measures now in the years, and I'm on that subcommittee, 2030, 2060, 2100. That I'm just hoping that if there's anything that we can do now that might push 2060 to 2100, for instance, while we're doing an improvement plan, and I realize this is only a 5-year capital improvement plan, but I think it's just really good to try to stay on top of that and make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's on sea level rises. We're doing capital projects in areas that are vulnerable. So, okay. I think that most of my other questions, were answered, so I thank people for that. Commissioner Schwartz, your light's on? Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd first like to start by expressing my appreciation to staff on page 5 of our staff report under project prioritization, which has been a key interest of mine. You've heard some of my colleagues also, and I pressed staff to ask Ms. Bjork when this item was coming to us to really help us understand how to consider prioritization because we don't have the funds. We will not have the funds to do everything simultaneously. So that I see that number one is safety, number two, maintaining existing infrastructure, and then number three, there are 4 bullets under that. I won't take time to read them. But clearly, the city has a primary responsibility to safeguard our community members. And that also includes maintaining the infrastructure, even though these are separate bullet points of sorts. That's critical. So to that end, I want to comment both on the new police headquarters and fire. To me, first responders, safety, good working environment, being able to have the tools to do their job to protect us is paramount. So when I mentioned PowerPoint slide 11 and asked you that question, Ms. Velasquez, the $95 million. In 2011, when the Planning Commission, I was on the commission then, and some of us toured the deficient police headquarters we have now, there was a $50 million price tag, which seemed like an exorbitant amount. How are we ever going to secure those funds? Here we are only 7 years later, and it's 95, and we don't even know. I think, Ms. Bjork, you said that's sort of a placeholder even at $95 million. Why am I drilling down on this, even though it's not a general plan consistency issue? Because I believe that with construction costs, we know this on the housing side, continuing to increase, time is not on our side to find the right property to get a new police headquarters constructed so that it's not upwards of over $100 million and who knows beyond that. So I'm really hopeful that with the public process that's underway, it's already come to Planning Commission, as everybody knows, the new police headquarters location, the site considerations and so forth. I'm hoping we can really move this project along. So I appreciate having that in our binder. When I go to fire, I was going to ask a question, but I overlooked this when our fire representatives were here. Both on the data center improvements at Fire Station 1, and that's in our packet. I'm not going to ask it as a question, but I just want to call out what I think is very important in this, and then I'll go to our wildfire plan. The replacement of uninterruptible power supplies. How critical is that when we're talking about making sure that our fire personnel have everything they need to safeguard us, to be responsive and safeguard us? And I do believe personally that fire, along with a number of other environmental changes, is of paramount priority for the city to address. So now when I go to the item that Commissioner Lodge raised, and I just want to go to that actual page in our packet, under fire, the update to Community Wildfire Protection Plan and a programmatic EIR, I am staunchly in support of the $450,000. Not that we're going to be making a budget recommendation, but when we have the microphone, we like to be able to put something forward to council for consideration that we think is important. And here again, we have a very much out-of-date plan. And to me, this would be at one of the very top of the lists of our projects. I know we have many other safety issues, but this to me is of paramount importance. As we have seen tragically throughout California, there are other communities, even though we experience loss of property and life from the Thomas Fire and subsequent debris flow, it could have been worse. It has been worse in other California communities, devastatingly worse. And here again, I would say time is not on our side. So I'd like to see this be a sharp focus by council and budget allocation. And then lastly, I don't want to say on a lighter note, but getting back to the Mission Canyon Bridge Safety Project, Mr. Dayton made a comment that struck a chord with me. And I again was thinking of the fact that we haven't had destruction to this bridge yet. Look at the number of bridges that from the Thomas Fire and subsequent debris flow were taken out and have had to be rebuilt with no community input. Wow, consider if we wait, if we delay working together as a community to make sure that some reasonable, safety, aesthetically appealing, historically respectful project can move forward. Here again, I would say time is not on our side. I think it's just a matter of time. As was referenced, this is how Rocky Nook Park came to be. There will be something tragically that happens in that area, and then we will not have the time. We won't be afforded the public input to more sensitively and in a balanced way get the right project with the right safety improvements while respecting the aesthetics and historic resources and so forth. So to those in the community, in the neighborhood up in Mission Canyon who have concerns, please stay engaged and do so with, I would ask, with this in mind, that we do have to find a way forward together. Otherwise, I think the environment, Mother Nature, is going to force us to take action, and that might be on an expedited timeline with no community input. So with that, I know this has a ways to go, but I wanted to share those thoughts. And my kudos to staff, because I've been reviewing these projects for a number of years now, going into my 10th year as a planning commissioner this year. And I think there's been continuous improvement, not that staff asked me for my feedback per se on that, but I think we continue to craft, staff does that is, to craft the most comprehensive, technical, but user-friendly plan that we can all work with to try to help prioritize budgeting and workload, and that is responsive to community interests, community needs, and our environmental challenges. As our new fire chief said, climate change is real, it is here, and he's nodding affirmatively as I'm commenting on this, and we must take it very, very seriously. So thanks to everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwartz. Commissioner Jordan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd also like to thank staff. You've had to put up with me for the same amount of time on these reports every year and the prodding for prioritization, and I think the product we get to see is better. I get a better explanation every year. I have something else to say in the grocery line when somebody asks me what the heck, and I can explain it a little better, so I appreciate that too. And I'm also going to take a minute to talk about the wildfire protection plan, and I just want to make the point that it's not just the guy to the left who's lost a house in a fire, or the young lady to the right who's been evacuated 100 times, it seems like, while she's lived in her house. I live a parcel width off the ocean on the mesa, and I would be the last guy to go in a fire that swept through the city, but it's still a concern. I'll admit to you that a couple weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago, on December 30th, Commissioner Lodge and I had a conversation about an LA Times article. You fire guys have probably seen it. And it was kind of a backwards Monday morning quarterbacking look at the Woolsey fire, the Paradise fire, and the Napa fire, and drawing comparisons to each one of those fires, and also Monday morning quarterbacking. And what, as I shared with Ms. Lodge, what jumped up at me was that that this preconceived notion that the two fires up north were in these heavily wooded, mountainous areas, and different from the Woolsey fire, were contradicted by some of the statistics. And the one that rose to me was that the Woolsey fire traveled horizontally across acreage at the same speed as the Napa and the campfire in Paradise. So it gobbled up the same amount of acreage in the same or faster time that those fires did up in the mountains. And that could happen here. And then a couple quotes that rose up out of interviews with public safety officials and fire officials, and I think these are related more towards resources rather than blame, but the two quotes were, "We plan for what we're capable of and hope it isn't worse," and the other one was, "We practice drills that guarantee success and hope that they can be scaled up if they need to be more than that." And these speak to me dramatically to the changed conditions that we face due to climate change, due to warming, whatever it is, due to less water, due to where we live, and the need to update that plan. So along those lines, I'll just make the motion to get it started, and that's that the Planning Commission has reviewed the projects added to the 5-year plan, and we find it consistent with the general plan. And I'm going to be nasty and throw a rider recommendation on there, and that would be a recommendation to council to view the update to the CWPP as a priority in their budgeting process.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Jordan, thank you for that, and a second by Commissioner Lodge. Commissioner Thompson?
Well, I certainly agree with that. And I would ask, when this goes forward to the council, that staff would expand the information in the staff report to include the information that Ms. Bjork gave us before, that the projects that are included are not only depreciable capital assets, but that they are large, one-time only projects that are included there, and to give a better explanation to the decision makers. But I definitely support sending it forward with the recommendation to up the priority for the Wildland Fire Plan. So I'll be voting in favor.
Question, Madam Chair?
Thank you. Yes,
Question.
Commissioner
I
Schwartz?
didn't know if Mr. Poiré specifically was looking for not only a prioritization recommendation from the Planning Commission, but I noted that you said that $250,000 really isn't sufficient. $450,000 is probably the more accurate, required new estimate, and I didn't know if you would like our recommendation on that amount, or is just further prioritizing it sufficient?
So actually,
I think that question is actually to the motion maker.
Right. So actually, what I heard him say was that he would appreciate any group elevating the discussion to council, and that's what I'm willing to do. And then we'll let him stand up. We'll let that department stand up and make their case.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. I'm also going to support the motion. It's just imperative, I think, that we move this forward, and I would like to see council actually put some money towards the plan and open up perhaps some more opportunities. I want to thank staff for everything before we vote on the motion, and for all being here and answering all our questions. You're all very knowledgeable and very succinct, and obviously very good at what you do. So I appreciate that. And I wanted to just say a special shout out for the grant money that you get. It's pretty phenomenal. It was, I think, $53 million, and you have some incredible figure that I can't remember that you're looking at, 171 or 51 million or something, 171. Okay. Yeah. And it speaks to, I've seen it when I was on the Parks and Recreation Commission. I saw it in Creeks. They were really, really great at doubling their dollars with grants, and I really appreciate the effort throughout the city that you really go after these. I think it's really helped us. It helps our citizens, and a special shout out to city staff for pursuing these and being successful at them. So, okay, so I don't see any other lights on. So with that, we have a motion and a second. Everyone understands it. Don't need it read back, I don't think. Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And we're going to take a 5-minute recess while the next item gets prepared. Thank you for your patience. 1, County General Plan designation, residential 4.6 units per acre for a subdivision of a 29,600 square foot parcel into 3 lots and annexation of the parcels into the city of Santa Barbara as initiated by the Planning Commission on October 5th, 2017. Discretionary applications required for approval include a tentative subdivision map to allow the division of one parcel into 3 lots, and recommendation to City Council and the Local Agency Formation Commission, LAFCO, of annexation and reorganization of the property from unincorporated area of Santa Barbara County to the City of Santa Barbara. General plan amendment to add the property to the city's general plan map with designation of low-density residential 5 dwelling units per acre, and zoning map amendment to add the subject property to the city's zoning map with the designation of RS-7.5 residential single unit, 7,500 square foot minimum lot size in the Upper State Street area overlay. So with that, we will have a, Commissioner Schwartz has an announcement. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a disclosure, I participated in the October 3rd site visit and was here on October 5th. However, I needed to depart early, so I did not participate in the vote, but I watched our hearing on replay, am caught up on all the documentation, so I feel comfortable and confident to participate today. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwartz. Okay, so with that, we will have a staff presentation, and then the applicant's agent can have, or the applicant can have up to 20 minutes. And if we do have any speakers that show up here, they'll get 2 minutes each, and then it's back to the commission. So, okay, so Mr. Baumann, go ahead. Welcome.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Wiscombe and commissioners. My name's Tony Baumann. I'm with the City Planning Division. This project is a request for an annexation and subdivision at 726 North La Cumbre Road. This shows, this is a vicinity map. The project's located sort of just outside the northwest side of the city, above State Street, below Foothill Road, and between North La Cumbre Road and North Hope Avenue. This convoluted blue line on the map is the boundary between the city and the county. And generally to the north and west of this blue line is county, and south and east of the line is city. And the project site is highlighted in red, adjacent to the city boundary. This is a photograph of the project site as if you're standing in La Cumbre Road looking toward Pym Place, which is across street. That house in the picture is on the subject site and would be remain there on one of the, well, it's the only house on the subject parcel, and it would remain when the 3 lots are created. This is an aerial view of the site. The subject property is outlined in green. So North La Cumbre Road runs up and down, north and south to the left side of the screen. And the cross street just south of the subject property is Pym Place. So there's an existing paved street there. It's a city street and a city right-of-way. And I've outlined the parcel on the south side of Pym Place just to show really the edge of the right-of-way. So you can see the right-of-way where the project's proposing improvements on Pym Place. There, in the middle of the subject property is a 2-car garage. You can see that would be demolished to make room for the 2 new lots, and a carport would be reconstructed for the existing house there. This image is from a page of the tentative subdivision map, and I've added some coloring to make things a little more clear. So again, the subject site is outlined in green, and then the 3 lots are shown by the 3 shaded colors. The green shaded color, the corner of North La Cumbre and Pym Place is the existing house, and it shows where the new carport would be located. And then the new lot 2 and lot 3 in sort of purple and yellow colors. The public improvements on Pym Place would be part of this project. So I've kind of shown those with colors because there's so many lines on this drawing, it's hard to know what's what. So the light blue color would be the new paving for Pym Place. The existing Pym Place kind of wanders outside of its right-of-way onto the subject site, so it would be aligned right in the middle of the existing city public right-of-way. And then the dark blue areas indicate the new driveway aprons, just to help show you kind of the layout of the lots and the access, the driveways to the lots. The three on the south would be new aprons for existing driveways for those houses to the south as the street is moved toward the south. So there's a white area between that light blue and the subject site. That would be a curb and a parkway strip. And the round circles would be new street trees in the parkway strip, and then a 5-foot sidewalk adjacent to the subject site property line. And then on the south side of the street paving would just be a curb with no sidewalk improvements, just the street paving, a curb along the south side, and the driveway aprons. So today's Planning Commission hearing is part of a bigger process, so I kind of mapped out the process on this slide. The Planning Commission already initiated the annexation in October of 2017. After that, the project went to the Single Family Design Board for a conceptual review of a subdivision grading plan. And today's hearing is highlighted in blue, where today the PC is asked to make a recommendation to the City Council on the annexation and reorganization, and a recommendation to Council on a general plan map amendment and zoning map amendment. And then the Planning Commission today would take an action on the tentative subdivision map, to take an action to approve or deny the tentative subdivision map. So that approval today by the Planning Commission would be contingent upon the annexation and map amendments happening. So following today's hearing, just to kind of show you what's coming after this, city and county staff would do a tax exchange agreement negotiation to see what portion of property taxes would go to the city to pay for the city taking over services. And then the City Council would hold a hearing where they would make a recommendation to the local agency formation commission, who would take an action ultimately on the annexation. So the council would make a recommendation to LAFCO on the annexation. And at that hearing, the City Council could take an action for approval of the general plan map amendment and zoning map amendment. Then there's a local agency formation commission hearing for approval of the annexation. And then following all that, the project would follow through City Public Works on the subdivision map, return to the Single Family Design Board for approval of the subdivision grading plan, and work with Public Works on a Public Works permit to make the public improvements to Penn Place. So getting down to today's business, today the Planning Commission would make a recommendation to Council on the annexation, and the criteria for that are given by a City Council resolution that calls for consideration of projects in the city's sphere of influence. I'll show you a map in a minute that the project is in the city's sphere of influence. The criteria for the application is that the project must be in the sphere of influence and adjacent to the city boundary, and put forward as a request by the owner. The general plan has a section on policies regarding annexations, and one of those is a key policy that says projects that are in the city's sphere of influence should be annexed at the earliest convenience. The project, the reorganization, would involve change of services. The city would be providing fire, police, water, and sewer services. Currently, the city is providing sewer, so the project would detach from the Goleta Water District and the county fire and county police, and be served by city fire and police and water. And I added this note here because the council resolution on annexations talks about annexations kind of by default be added into the city's hillside design district, But in that case, we don't recommend that it be included in the Hillside Design District. It's not in an area that would call for that. It's over half a mile away from the nearest Hillside Design District, which is sort of over by San Roque above Foothill Road. And it's not in an area of significant hills, so it shouldn't be included in the Hillside Design District. This is a little bit, I mean, it's showing the whole city, so it's a bit hard to see, but, got it. Let's change slides. Automatic, okay. So this north area up above the Hope neighborhood is a large piece of sphere of influence, and the project is in that area. Oh. And then this is zoomed in, and the project is right here. So the lighter yellow color is city, and the darker color is county, but in the city sphere of influence. This is just another view. The orange color is city limits, and the yellow color is county. So the annexation would just move the city boundary from the east and south of the subject lot, just move it to the north and west to encompass the subject property. Now moving on for today, the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to Council on the general plan map amendment. This is pretty simple. It doesn't involve any change to what the general plan says. It would just change the map to do what I just described here, to move the boundary of the city, and all the general plan policies go with it. And the existing county general plan and existing city general plan are really about as comparable as they could be. The proposed 5 units an acre is compatible with the surrounding density of the county, which is 4.6 units per acre, and adjacent city at 5 units per acre. The project is consistent with general plan policies regarding annexations. This was where I went to say earlier that this talks about these properties in the city's sphere of influence being annexed at the earliest convenience, and other relevant policies related to housing. This provides infill housing, and the project scope of work goes to a pretty great length to replace trees that were necessary to be removed to realign the street. Also goes to great lengths to address stormwater, because the project's proposing permeable pavers as street paving. The properties and the new lots and new dwellings created are not in an area that's noisy, and the soils on the site are appropriate for this type of development. And this, I won't go into great detail on this. This is just the general plan amendment would just be to move that line out to encompass the subject site. That already shows what I talked about regarding the density. So the next item for the Planning Commission today is to make a recommendation to the City Council on a zoning map amendment. Similar idea, where the existing county and city zoning are comparable. The county zoning is called 8R1, single family residential, meaning 8,000 square foot minimum lot area. And the proposed city zoning would be RS 7.5/USS, which stands for single unit residential, 7,500 square foot minimum lot area. And it has a zoning overlay of Upper State Street. But the Upper State Street zoning overlay really doesn't have much applicability to residential or single-family residential. Those zoning provisions of that overlay mostly pertain to non-residential development. And here again is the zoning map. Same thing. The boundary would just be amended on the map to encompass the project site. Okay, so today at this hearing, the Planning Commission can take an action to approve the subdivision, and it is consistent with zoning. It meets that minimum lot size that we just described. It has street frontage, etc. It's consistent with the general plan policies that we just mentioned. And the way the subdivision ordinance is Title 22 of the Municipal Code, and it's sort of written in the negative, where it describes what is required to deny a request for a subdivision. And I've kind of summarized that on this slide. Some of the reasons that the Planning Commission could deny the request would be if the site was not physically suitable for the type and density of development, or the project would cause significant environmental damage or injure fish or wildlife or their habitat, cause health problems, or conflict with easements. So there aren't any easements or any significant wildlife or fish habitat. The trees, that wasn't really considered to be habitat, although the applicant's project description really mitigates the removals of trees with tree replacements. And then other provisions in Title 27 talk about not restricting or impeding access to public natural resources. In this case, there aren't any that would need the access, and the project wouldn't violate any water quality requirements. So with all that said, the staff recommendation is for the Planning Commission to approve the tentative subdivision map and recommend to City Council approval of the annexation, the general plan map amendment, and the zoning plan or zoning map amendment. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Bauman. Appreciate it. Ms. Carlson, come on up. Welcome. And if you just put the, I'm going to put 20 minutes on here. I don't think you probably need 20 minutes, but if you just put the mic down so we can all hear you, that's, yeah, that's up. Up. What, you want her to get taller or what? She's okay?
She was tall.
Okay. Welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you. I will definitely not take the 20 minutes, but appreciate your continued attention. I know it has been a long day for you. So thank you. My name is Zoe Carlson. I'm an agent for the applicant, who is the owner and resident of the property. And Tony already did a great job queuing you up to the decision in front of you today, as well as a little bit on the history of the project. I'm just going to touch on a couple more details. Just a little bit of background on the project. We have been through the development application review team, really getting a lot of feedback and clarification from city staff on requirements associated with the project. Particularly drilling down the specifics of the required public improvements and making sure that we have an understanding of the different requirements among the city divisions for those public improvements. I was here in 2017 in October for the initiation of annexation, and appreciate moving forward with the next step of that today. We also did go before Single Family Design Board, as Tony mentioned, in July, and they were also unanimously supportive of the project. Just a couple more details of the project. It is consistent with the general plan and zoning within the sphere of influence, as Tony mentioned. It's also consistent with adjacent land uses and will complete the incorporation of the Penn Place into the city. Tony also touched on the annexation and reorganization. Just wanted to also mention that we have spoken with Goleta Water District and LAFCO in their supportive project and working with us to move this through their process. Touching a little bit more on the public improvements along North La Cumbre, a big change to the project over the past year was modifying the plans to be consistent with the planned city project along North La Cumbre, which is a Measure A project. So this plan will be consistent with that project. Public improvements along Penn Place, Tony already touched on the realignment, the parkway sidewalk, and the street trees associated with that. We have had several meetings with city staff to clarify stormwater requirements, make sure that we do capture and infiltrate stormwater from the project. Our understanding of the project site began with siting the projects, the lots, proposed lots appropriately, and the preliminary grading and drainage plan for stormwater flow, and we have a proposed additional infiltration mechanisms. This one is a depiction of the parkway. There are permeable pavement pavers shown for the driveway. That's for the relocation of the Lot 1 driveway. And then permeable concrete pavement for Penn Place. And in conclusion, the applicant is in support of staff's recommendation. We appreciate the work that staff from the multiple departments have put into clarifying the process for us, as well as the requirements, and look forward to moving forward with the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate it. Well, I'd open it up for public comment, but I don't see any speakers here, so public comment is closed, and it's back to the commission. We can start with question. Did you have a question, Commissioner Higgins? Good. Now's the time. Go for it.
Ms. Carlson, is it? You have your surveyors Waters, your engineers, Cassesi, you guys are Dudek. The city's had stormwater regs on the books for a number of years. Why did you have to have so many meetings to work that out?
There was a need for clarification between the different departments' requirements. It is not standard practice to have permeable concrete on city streets. And so there was a little bit of discussion on whether or not that would be appropriate for this particular street, and an ultimate conclusion that would be for both the creeks as well as public works.
So was the street paving part of your impermeable surface area that triggered the tier 2 or 3 or what?
Right. So none of the work on private property triggers stormwater compliance. However, the required public improvements along Penn Place did require tier 3 stormwater requirements.
So the confusion was, or no, I want to use, that's my word, but how to meet the standards when putting in a public street, which I guess we don't do a lot of that here because we don't do a lot of subdivisions in a built-out city. So that was the nature of the I guess, early stumbling block on how to. The city wasn't, I guess, giving you good advice on the front end that their standards apply to their streets. Fair?
The initial guidance we got was not consistent between departments.
Got it.
So we had to get the departments together to come up with an approach that was acceptable for everybody.
And then when you went to SFBD, what did they review?
They reviewed the proposed tentative map.
But just the map, and there was no architecture, right?
Correct.
Okay. No wonder you got a 5.0.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Higgins, just to clarify, one of the reasons that we do require that is due to the potential need for grading with subdivisions. Sometimes it can result in a lot of grading, which could be a concern.
Retaining walls, et cetera, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's just to make sure that they feel that aesthetically it's an appropriate place for the subdivision.
Well, I'm glad they got through it in one hearing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other lights on. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. I have a question for staff. It's not specifically to this project, but it includes this project. There are several unusual islands and incursions of county property into the city property in this part of town. is the city at all proactive about trying to include and get all of those little islands and peninsulas incorporated into the city so that we can do fewer of these general plan amendments and LAFCO proceedings, et cetera, and do it all at one time rather than piecemeal, or do we only depend on waiting for a particular property owner to bring it forward?
Do you want to answer that, Allison?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Thompson, I would say in general the answer is no, we are not proactive about it. The city's annexation policy is that it's at the request of a property owner. However, we will also look at requests from LAFCO. So oftentimes if an applicant is starting the process and they check in with LAFCO, if LAFCO recommends, talk to this group, try to get these other properties involved, we typically do that. What we've found with most of these thus far is that the other property owners aren't interested. So we leave it at that. We don't pursue it any further if those property owners don't show interest.
I could see that as the property owner, if they don't have any issues with their current circumstances, why would they incur any additional expense to be annexed into the city? But it's got to be confusing and convoluted for things like utilities like water and sewer and police and fire when you have county islands that are surrounded by city, and it just seems like LAFCO would be wanting to have all of these little islands eliminated, and maybe the city could step up and do it rather than putting the burden on the individual property owners. I just wondered if we had any, if we've ever had any efforts in that regard, and certainly would be an improvement to do it all at one time rather than piecemeal. But thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Schwartz?
Mr. Bowman, would you just remind me, please, in the conditions of approval, maybe it's just that I don't see this very often because of the subdivision map issue, 1A7, it's on the first page of the conditions, to pay the inclusionary housing in lieu fee. To remind me if this is customary with the parcel map submittal, or can you see that? I'm in Exhibit A, the conditions of approval, 1A7. Remind me what triggers the requirement for paying the inclusionary housing in lieu fee.
I believe any subdivision, even if it was a two-lot, I mean, even if you were creating one new lot, I think there's still an inclusionary fee, and it's based on the number of units and the size of the units. The fee could be lower for a smaller size unit, but we did that calculation and provided that to the applicant, what that fee is.
Okay. The question that Commissioner Higgins asked about the permeable versus impermeable paving, we could go back to that one.
Crystal, could you switch to my slides?
If I understood this question and the answer there.
So this light blue color is that permeable concrete
paving.
paving.
Can you use maybe your mouse or the cursor to
just all this?
Yeah, the mouse to kind of draw it for us.
This whole blue shaded area would be permeable concrete paving.
And did I hear you correctly that's really an anomaly of sorts? I mean, it's unusual, shall we say? Is it that we have found materials more state-of-the-art materials to do this more frequently going forward, where both transportation and fire and these other departments are more comfortable with permeable in this form? I seem to recall in years past that there was a question about permeable. Maybe it was from the fire department with the larger, heavier fire trucks, and they were not in support of that. Can you take me back to that?
Well, this may be the first project in the city to propose permeable concrete.
I'm sorry, say that again, Mr. Bowman?
This is the first project we've seen in the city proposing permeable concrete as a material.
Yeah, that's why it stands out for me. That's why I'm just asking to understand,
I don't
how
know
we're
how
able
many-
to. I mean, I'm pleased. I'm just curious. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is very costly, right?
I don't know how many prior projects have triggered full stormwater treatment for right-of-way improvements like this. Like we said, we don't have that many projects proposing a length of street like this. But one idea was to have at least this amount of street kind of taken care of as one unit rather than little piecemeal right-of-way improvements with their own individual little best management or their own little retention basins or, various different types of water treatment along a given street. So at least this one's unified in that way.
And Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Schwartz, the applicant did analyze other options for solving stormwater in the street, and this was the one that ended up working. And as Ms. Carlson mentioned, this is not a typical street for Public Works to maintain. So there was some hesitation. And one of the reasons that they agreed to accept this as a public street and to try this is because this is a small street. And so it can work as a good trial, and they can really see if the permeable pavement is something that holds up and what the maintenance requirements are, and use it almost as a test project. So they did agree to accept this, which is not their standard detail.
Well, that's excellent. I think if there's a way to, through Ms. Carlson and Dudek's involvement, provide some type of a follow-up feedback to us, I'd be very interested to see how this works out and if this is the type of paving that we could use in this type of instance going forward, or at least offer it or recommend it to an applicant. That would be terrific. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwartz. I just had questions, just for the record. The neighbors on the south side of Penn Place were notified of the project, and there aren't any, we didn't get any correspondence. So they knew about this meeting, and are the driveway aprons that are going to be installed for them, they're replacement aprons, correct?
Right.
And are they consistent with the widths of their driveways now, where we don't have any issues in terms of apron being narrower than driveway on the existing ones? Is that correct?
I don't know for sure. I know this first house with this has a very wide driveway and an RV parking space right here. You can see that in the aerial photograph.
Yes.
I couldn't say that for sure.
Okay.
Because this line at the bottom of this permeable concrete would be a new curb, so they have curb cuts and new driveway aprons. But I can't answer the question about matching up existing driveways.
Existing driveway widths with
Right.
aprons. Okay. I would think that would be important. Did you have any comments on that, Ms. Carlson?
Yeah. That was something that we did have reviewed through the last round of staff comments, and that was something that we did incorporate.
So the widths will be matching the widths of the driveways?
Yeah, and that's
Okay.
why if you go back to the last one, they're a little...
And Chair Wiscombe, there will be a slight change because the city does have standard driveway apron widths.
Well,
and
that's
so
why I'm asking the question.
You can see that those aprons are a little bit different, and then it has to widen back up to match up with the driveway once it gets onto the private property. So it is going to be slightly different than the existing situation where the driveway apron is essentially the entire driveway because there isn't a curb. So that will get narrowed right at the curb, but then widen back out to
Okay,
match.
well, my question is where it matches up to the existing driveway. So that will be taken care of. The only reason I'm asking the question is we haven't had any public comment. That's a change for the existing residents, and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, at least at a public hearing. We're all on the same page as to what that's going to look like. So you're saying that where it flares back out to match up with the existing driveway, it will flare back out to the width of the existing driveway. Is that
Right.
correct, Ms. DeBus?
And Chair Wiscombe, staff had the same concern because we hadn't heard from these neighbors, and this project will affect them because the right-of-way line is back a ways into what would appear to be their front yards. So I think it was January 3rd, I mailed out letters to all the addresses of all these houses, addressed to owner or occupant of all these addresses, just as a courtesy. And that letter went to them about a week ahead, and I told them that it would be followed by a formal notice of this hearing. So they also got the regular notice of this hearing. But I did want to reach out to them, but I have not heard anything in response.
Were they notified that they had private improvements in the public right-of-way that would be removed?
Well, I made it clear in my letter that the street was moving over toward them. Okay. I made it more explicit in my letter to them that I sent out.
And that they may have encroaching landscaping or something
right.
that might have to be removed to accommodate the improvements to the
Mm-hmm.
right-of-way.
And the notice language, I believe, talked about tree removals also in the project description.
So you're confident that they have all the proper notification?
We tried.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, that's all you can do. You know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink. So,
And Chair Wiscombe, just to be clear, this is one property owner. There are several houses on it, so there are several occupants, but it is one property owner.
Oh, on the south side of the street?
Correct.
Oh, okay. Well, that's, excuse me, that makes a big difference. Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Higgins, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just for on that note, I guess one property owner could make it even more difficult too, but I didn't notice that. Thanks for bringing it up. So you have an obligation to construct those, Ms. Carlson?
The proposed improvements do not extend beyond the right-of-way. So all of the proposed public improvements are within the city's existing right-of-way.
Okay, but the right-of-way ends at the dashed line, is that correct?
Yes.
So those driveway aprons are in the public right-of-way?
Correct.
Then you have the obligation to construct those?
Correct.
Got it, okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. I'm just seeing if I have any more questions. No, I think that's pretty much it. So would someone like to move on with? Oh,
How'd I do the last time on one of these? Pretty well, right? Okay.
Well, Commissioner Thompson's light's on. Do you want to give it to him?
I move the staff report with conditions and findings in the staff report.
Second.
Okay, we have, okay. So what I'm getting, I just want to go back to this. Where is it?
May I clarify?
Yeah, could we?
I have a question to clarify our motion.
Well,
Mr. Baumann, could you put up?
If you want me to make it more convoluted
Well,
and verbose, I can do that.
No,
but
what I'd really like you to do is just, I know you're moving the staff recommendation, but we have, the Planning Commission can approve the tentative subdivision map and recommend to City Council. Just if you put that slide up and then Commissioner Thompson can. No, we don't.
On page 3, paragraph Roman numeral 3, that's what I move. Second paragraph.
Okay.
Planning Commission make a recommendation to the City Council to approve the annexation, general plan amendment, zoning map amendment, and approve the tentative subdivision map contingent upon the approval of the annexation by LAFCO, making the findings outlined in Section 6 of this report subject to conditions of approval in Exhibit A.
Second.
That's fine. Okay, thank you. I just had a commissioner ask for clarification on your motion, which is why I went there. So, okay, that's fine. So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Baumann. Thank you, Ms. Carlson. Congratulations. You get to move on to whatever the next step is. So, great. Okay, so we're moving on. We're moving on to. Ms. Carlson, while you're still here. Oh, excuse me. There is a 10-day appeal period for our recommendation, our motion up here today. So I'm announcing that 10-day appeal period to City Council. Would you like your plans back? Okay. Great. Okay, and while that's taking place, we're moving on. Thank you, Ms. DeBusk. We're moving on to item number 4, which is administrative agenda. A is committee and liaison reports. A1 is staff hearing officer liaison report. Anything?
Side yard setbacks and lot area modification.
Okay,
So-
sounds like a lot of fun. Okay, great. And then A2 is other committee and liaison reports. Does anyone have, Commissioner Schwartz has something to report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As part of the local coastal plan update, and you and I are subcommittees on that committee, separately but related, the lower cost overnight accommodation study is moving forward, and there's going to be a public informational meeting January 30th from 1 to 2 p.m. at the David Gebhardt Public Meeting Room at 630 Garden Street. All are welcome. This will be the first public meeting on the lower cost overnight accommodations, and I know there's a significant interest in the community, and so encourage all to attend that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwartz. I'm glad you reminded the public about that. Okay, and then the only other thing that we have is today at our regular lunch meeting, we did the 2019 liaison appointments, and we need a motion and a second and a vote to approve the liaison appointments as assigned during the lunch meeting.
Move to approve.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at a sidebar comment up here.
Move to approve what we did at the lunch meeting.
Yeah, okay. So move to approve. We have a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. And the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.